Welcome, everyone, to our Resilience in Challenging Times series. It's my great joy and a privilege to be able to welcome New York Times bestselling author of Women, Food, and God, someone who is warm, funny, and a friend to me and sounds true, Geneen Roth. Welcome, Geneen, to our Resilience in Challenging Times series.
Oh, thanks so much, Tami. I'm really glad to be here. It's a privilege to be here.
Wonderful. And I want to hop right into this topic of resilience because I think you have a special personal window into resilience, knowing what I know about your life story and even just your life story over the last 12 years. You were involved as an investor in the Bernie Madoff scandal and lost your life savings and then went through a period of time and had to recover from that. And I wanted to start our conversation there. And then we're going to build up to some more recent events that have challenged, I think, your capacity for resilience. And I want to understand from everything you've been through in your heroic life, what you've learned about resilience that could be helpful to our listeners. But let's track back to 2008. And maybe you can briefly share not just what you went through, but what you learned in recovering from losing your life savings like that.
The moment I found out, it was through a phone call, who told me that Bernie Madoff was in handcuffs and everything was gone. Just to backtrack a little bit, my husband and I had already lost half of our life savings with a financial advisor that was a very close friend. It turned out he had embezzled our money. And then another friend who had been invested with Madoff for 30 years put his arms around us and said, I'm going to do you a favor. I'm going to let you into this Madoff fund. I've been invested in for 30 years. My father was a personal friend of Madoff, and we felt very grateful. And over a period of years, we ended up investing everything we had in that. And I often say to people, don't listen to any financial advice I give. If I happen to give financial advice, run in the opposite direction immediately. So we put everything in. One of the first rules of financial investment, diversify we didn't do. Then we lost it all. And that very day I found out, I called two friends. And each of them said to me in their different way, nothing of any value has been lost. Nothing of any value has been lost. And I was furious. Everything had been lost. And I couldn't even imagine how they could say that to me. And my response was, this is not the time to be spiritual. And they said, each in their own ways, this is exactly the time. You've been practicing for all these years. And I soon realized that if I was going to survive the terror, the shame, I was so ashamed of what we had done, the grief and the confusion of how we were going to live because we really were left with nothing. I was quickly going to have to focus on what wasn't lost, what I could find, not what I had lost, what I had enough of, not what I didn't. And I had to be vigilant about it in a way that I really hadn't been vigilant in my meditation practice. You know, it's one thing to practice daily, which I'd been doing for quite a long time. It's another thing to be on that knife edge and not really let your mind wander and get involved in narrative and story. But the second I did, after we lost our money, I was in terror, grief, and shame. And so I kept bringing myself back to the simplest things, kept asking myself in this moment, aside from having lost our money, which really was just a thought in that very moment, am I okay now? My feet are on the ground. I have a teacup, I have tea, I have chocolate, I have love in my life, I have ground and walls and lamps and chandeliers. The, I was really okay. And so I kept bringing myself back to that over and over and over again. And within a little while, Tami, I don't remember how long it was. I think it was a few days, but I think it was longer than that. I felt happier than I had been in years, years.
Now, what would you say, Geneen, to someone who's listening right now and says, oh my God, another spiritual perspective on how much I've lost right now? I'm in the grief part of the process. I'm in the enraged part of the process. What does Geneen have to say to me right now where I'm at?
I would say I understand that grief and I understand that rage. And I think it's important not to push feelings away, not to pretend. I actually don't think it's possible to do that, to make grief go away, to make rage go away. It's really important to acknowledge it, to let it come through, to let it come in the waves, particularly grief comes in waves that just knock you down. And then also important to notice that we have a tendency to want to stay there, to want to elaborate on it, to allow it to be there, but also to notice the tendency to want to elongate it, to really feel like the world is against me here. And because it brings up a history of feeling like that. So I would say there's an edge there between the reality of the situation now, the grief, the rage, the loss, and also the truth of what you still have. And I think it's important to go back and forth with those two.
Now, an interesting part of your life story, I mean, there's so many interesting parts. I think you've had such an interesting life journey, is that you actually wrote a New York Times bestseller after this happened and were featured by Oprah and made all of the money back and more that you lost. And that's interesting, you know, and I'm curious, do you think there was anything in your own attitude, in your own, you could say, resilient posture that enabled that to happen? Or would you just chalk it up to good fortune? Or how do you view that?
You know, I have thought about that exact question many times, Tami. And the truthful answer is I don't know. What I do know is there was no resistance to having lost the money. I didn't think of Madoff as, I mean, I was really glad he was arrested and glad he was behind bars, but I didn't feel like a victim of that circumstance. I didn't keep circling around that. I really felt like, what could I see from this? And so I was much more open than I would have been had I stayed in fear and terror. I think the fear and the terror and the shame would have kept me locked in and kept me contracted and closed so that I would not have been able to write.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's fast forward now, and it's the end of 2019, and a very unfortunate development occurs with your health, where you discover that you have breast cancer. And I'm happy to report to our viewers and listeners now that you are, by all best assessments, cancer free, and we can have this conversation in that light of you being cancer-free, but here it is at the end of last year. And, it's a moment that I think most women it's the last thing that you would ever, one of the last things you'd ever want to hear. So help me understand what was going on for you and how you processed this experience.
Just a little bit of a medical history. I resisted getting mammograms for a while. I didn't want to. And then because I kept telling my doctor, I love my breasts. I'm sure I'm not going to ever get breast cancer. I love my breasts. And she convinced me to get a mammogram, which I did after a couple of years, and something suspect showed up, and I still didn't believe that I had breast cancer. There was something in me that was so convinced that I did not have breast cancer, that I was not going to get breast cancer. I think there was also some kind of separation thinking inside me. Cancer happens to other people, but not to me. That wasn't even conscious, that bad things happen to other people. I mean, you'd think by then, having lost
Yeah.
our money, I would have understood that wasn't true. But in any case, there I was again. And when I got the biopsy, they told me I had cancer, and I was shocked. I kind of went into one of those dissociative times. The radiologist, who wasn't supposed to tell me that I had cancer because he was just doing the test, said to me, "This is cancer." And I went mute and dissociated. By that I mean I didn't feel anything. By the time I got outside that building, when I called my husband, at that point I was crying about breast cancer. It still was almost unbelievable to me because I felt fine. And so somebody saying you have breast cancer when I felt fine. I mean, I just walked into that building a half an hour before as somebody who didn't know she had cancer. And then all of a sudden I was told you do have cancer. I cried a lot that first night. But that first night, I also woke up in the middle of the night with this very odd voice. I'm not somebody who hears voices. I'm not somebody who sees angels. I'm not somebody who believes in that whole, I don't even know what to call it. I do believe in the invisible world. Of course I do. Otherwise, I wouldn't be practicing and meditating. But I heard a voice that said, the cancer is about love. And I thought, wow, what is that? After I rolled my eyes, of course, because I had no idea what that meant. And but I noticed, I felt, oh, there's another way of being with this besides being scared to death. It was also possible to be scared, but to see another way, to start asking myself. And by the next morning, I was asking myself, okay, what is the invitation here? What is this cancer, if you want to say it like that, asking of me in this moment? Or what is it inviting me into that I have been ignoring forever? Now, I don't know if anybody read that book, Grace and Grit, by Ken and Treya Wilbur, that they wrote together when she, Ken's wife, then wife, had breast cancer. And in the book, she is talking about what she wants to change and how she might have created the cancer. And this is sort of the, I think, the slippery slope with cancer. Mm-hmm. What did I do? How did I create it? Was it my thinking? Was it my feeling? Was it all the sugar I ate from the time I was 4 years old to the time I was 30? How am I to blame here? And what they said in that book was there are many factors involved in getting cancer, But as long as you have it, why not use it to look and see what you actually do want to change? What has been there? What patterns you have felt stuck in, so to speak, that might need your attention? And so that's how I decided to really be with this cancer. And that started almost right away, because again, like with the Madoff loss, I realized that I could spend the time cowering and in terror about how big it was. What was I going to do? When was it? Had it spread to my lymph nodes, my lungs? Was I going to die? You know, and of course, those were all questions I needed to grapple with, as well as the grief that you mentioned to me before. So it was a whole display of emotions that came, along with the understanding that if I resisted it, felt sorry for myself, felt like, why me? I was never going to see what the invitation was. And that started right away.
Now, this voice that you heard, regardless of where it came from, the
Yes.
sentence, the cancer is about love. Tell me more about what that means to you. How did you understand, I mean, I've always thought you're a very loving person, Geneen, so I'm curious about that.
Thank you, Tami.
Yeah.
It felt to me that love that was being referred to was a palpable kind of love. It was both about receiving love, which I am not very good at, really understanding and getting that I am lovable. I feel like I've had a belief, a pattern left over from childhood, from whatever you want to call it, from eons, about being deficient, being unlovable, not being good enough, just old beliefs. And so as I told close friends that I was diagnosed, or that my breast was diagnosed, because I felt right away that I didn't have cancer, that my breast had cancer. And that really felt like a distinction for me from the beginning. The love that got showered on me was extraordinary and really unexpected, I have to say. Unexpected. Ever since I had been young, I would think, gee, who would be there if something horrible happened? It was just something that I started developing as a kid, some kind of, I don't know what to call it, repetitive pattern of thought, obsession, perhaps.
But I think a lot of people think that way, like, who's really going to show up at my funeral? If enough people don't come, well, I have to ask my partner, please make sure you bring some extra people. Like, I think a lot of people have that thought about who's really there for me when it comes down to it.
Yes, because I noticed, my partner, husband, Matt, before he was with me, he was with somebody who died of ovarian cancer. And what he said to me about that experience afterwards, he grieved for 2 years. And he said that after a while, people just got kind of, okay, time to get over it. We love you. We're really sorry that Luann died. It's time to get over it now. It's been 6 months. It's been a year. And I wondered, of course, was that going to happen to me? Was Matt going to feel like that about the breast cancer? Were my friends going to feel like that? But that was a further along thought. In the immediate present, it was who was going to show up. And it was gorgeous. The love itself was beautiful, and I could feel it. It was like love had a texture and a color and a presence. And I could feel it. I could feel myself being loved. And Tami, I'd never felt that before. I mean, except for when I first met Matt.
Sure.
And then, of course, between us, and then at these moments with friends. But this was a concentrated, distilled dose of receiving love. In fact, I kind of set up my own funeral. I set up a Zoom call for myself in December, the night before the surgery. And I invited close friends. I'm sorry I didn't invite you, Tami, because
okay. I'm okay. I'm all right.
I know you are, but you know what? I love you.
Right.
And I know you love me. So I don't, now that I'm talking to you, I don't know why. I didn't tell that many people because I wanted to sort of be with it inside myself before I started mentioning it. But the people I did tell, I invited on the Zoom call, and it was a structured Zoom call that I had a friend of mine lead, and people spoke, of course, the way we do these rituals. Everybody has a turn to speak. This is before the big Zoom, the Zoom boom. And I cried throughout the whole thing because I could feel the love. I could really feel the love. And so it was that love that I'm talking about to answer your question. It was the ability to receive love and to know that I am loved. But it was also a covering off my heart where I felt like I could give love too. It wasn't just about receiving. It was also about feeling it, knowing there was love there. And giving it, not being afraid to be vulnerable, not being afraid to tell people in the moment. Whereas before I'm a little bit self-contained most of the time. But this was being willing to, because the other thing about cancer is death. You suddenly realize, or I suddenly realized, not just that cancer only happens to other people, but that I was going to die. Now, I didn't know if I was going to die of this cancer, and I didn't know when I was going to die. For the days before they diagnosed the type of cancer I had, how big it was, what I needed to do about it, there was a lot of unknown. And I realized, oh my God, I could die. This could be it. And I realized I didn't know the last few times I did so many things, maybe that was going to be the last time I did each of those things. Like the last time Matt and I went to Orcas Island in the Northwest. Like the last time Matt and I went to New York. Like I realized so much of my time I wasn't actually there, deeply there, appreciating that moment as possibly the last time I was going to be with, do that thing, see that, not take it in on that level. And so there was death. I felt like, and that's been a constant experience. It's been 6 months since the surgery, and that has never gone away. That feeling of facing the fact that I am going to die. Now, I didn't die from the cancer. Obviously, here I am. I'm cancer-free. But once you have cancer, you realize you could get cancer anytime. You're not immune from cancer. And of course, they told me the percentage of recurrence in my other breast and the percentage of recurrence in this breast and all of that. And so it's in my consciousness now in a way that it wasn't before. And that's only good. I mean, there are times where I feel terrified in the middle of the night, where my fear just runs away from me. And I really have to say, okay, I'm really scared. In fact, I'm terrified right now. And then I just am with it. Terror.
Now, Geneen, I think many people have heard the teaching to live with an awareness of death. And if you live with that awareness of death, you'll be more in the present. You'll be more awake to the love that's available between you and another person. But we forget. We forget like most of the time. I think most people forget most of the time. Without having to be diagnosed with an illness, what do you think can help people live with that kind of intense awareness that death can come at any time without warning? And how do we stop forgetting since we forget?
Well, I think that's a good question. I have been somebody who's been obsessed with death since I read Death Be Not Proud, this book by John Gunther about his son who died of a brain tumor. I started getting upset. I must have been 8 when I read that book. And then, of course, every headache I ever got after that, it's a brain tumor. I'm going to die. And so much so that I think it was that obsession with death that got me into Buddhism to begin with, to go to graveyards and to the burning ghats in India and to watch bodies burning and, that to wake myself up. I wish I could tell you a formula for that, Tami. If I look at my life, there's been enough catastrophic things that have happened to me. A teacher of mine once said, "You're very good at waking up in catastrophes, Geneen. Can you wake up without them?" is the question. And all I know is that a daily reminder, a couple of times a day, not particularly of death, because I'm not even sure that's helpful to say to oneself daily, I could die at any moment. You don't want to go into a contraction of, oh my God, I could die at any moment. I really better make sure this is in order and that's in order. And but I would say in the moment, every day, a couple of times a day, to take in what you have, to actually, because being scared of death, you could say, equals not being present for the life you have. Because for me, the reason I was most scared of death, I mean, yes, I was scared of what was going to happen when I was dying. Would I be in pain? Is there an afterlife? Was I going to have to get put before a judge and get reprimanded for not running into the fire to save children, even though that happened in Defend Your Life, the movie with Albert Brooks and Meryl Streep. But, for every selfish action I took, was I going to have it checked off in a box? Those were some of the reasons that I was scared of death for a while. But then after a while, I felt like my obsession with death, if you want to call it that, or focused on death, had to do with not wanting to miss my life in the moment, not wanting to miss being here now, like with you right now. Am I missing this, or do I feel my feet? Am I aware of the sheer joy of talking to you now, or am I running away with am I in my mind, or am I actually here? And I feel like that's the antidote. A couple of times a day. I don't think it's that big of a deal, Tami. I really don't. Because when I'm present and taking in the sheer abundance or ordinary gorgeousness, then I'm actually fully alive. And when I'm fully alive, then it feels like dying wouldn't be such a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you were describing receiving love and also giving love, when you were describing that as part of your process, I really felt it. I could really feel it right here. I felt like you showed our listeners and viewers something right in that moment. And I'd also like to know more about that for somebody who says, receiving's never been something I've been very good at. Oh yeah, shaw, whatever. And sometimes, what could allow that to be more in our aware availability as we go through our relationships in our life? What have you learned?
I have learned a couple of things, that as I was able to be more vulnerable, as I was able to actually express my love, then I was also able to receive love. It was a circuit. It wasn't just shower me with love. It was being in the moment when I was feeling loving, when I was feeling moved or tender towards somebody, or even, towards something, a flower, a tree. I mean, it's less obvious there, to actually say it. I think we feel they're going to think I'm dumb. They're going to think I'm silly. What if it's not reciprocated? What if I say I love you and they say, yeah, I love you too, but they don't really feel it. I started, for instance, with my brother, who I think before being diagnosed with cancer, since I've been probably 8 years old, I didn't really express my love very much. But I started feeling him and feeling how grateful I was to have a brother. It would have been really miserable to go through my family without my brother, and that he was there. So I started expressing it more. I also think, and I didn't say this, Tami, that part of the receiving of love was actually giving it to myself. I realized how unkind and unloving I had been with my body, with when I was tired, I just kept pushing. When like just pedal to the metal, not really giving myself, and therefore not receiving that kind of love. I felt like who I was what I did. My value got very hooked up with what I achieved. And so I just kept on achieving and producing. And that's actually who I knew that I wasn't that, but I didn't know I wasn't that. So giving that to myself was really hard. Stopping these automatic patterns that came from unlove. Okay, you got to do this to be loved. Are you following me here?
Of course I am, yeah.
Yeah. So turning that pattern around felt like it felt really necessary, but it felt like nails on blackboard, because I had been pushing myself for so long. I really didn't know how to stop. And I felt like bad things were going to happen if I did. That somehow I was going to get in trouble or get punished. Don't even ask me who or how or why, but that was part. I had to earn my place here on earth. I had to earn it. I had to sacrifice in order to feel okay about being alive. And because the cancer was so big and took so much out of me, just in terms of the surgeon and interviewing surgeons and what was I going to do and where was I going to do it and all these choices to make, I didn't have time to do my regular produce, achieve, do that whole thing. And there was an underground river of saying, oh my God, you're becoming irrelevant. You're not doing the thing that you were supposedly put here to do. You're not doing your work. Something bad's going to happen. So that was all tied up in having, in turning the love towards myself. And I find that with my, I teach retreats, and I find that with my students all the time. Their feet are cold and they don't want to put socks on. They don't want to take time to put socks on. They don't want to floss their teeth. They don't want to take the time for themselves to do what they need to do because they're so busy running ahead of themselves. And so that was an important part of receiving love.
And it sounds like through the journey you made with cancer that there was a shift in that now you're relating to your own being, not your doing Geneen, but being Geneen differently. Is that true?
I would say most of the time that's true. Not all the time. Every now and then, I feel like, what have I done? What have I achieved? I have to hurry up. Otherwise, I'm going to be left at the back of the class. Most of the time, I feel, oh, this is enough. I'm okay. I'm alive. I'm here. I have arms. I have legs. I can walk. I can feel. I can talk. I can see. And that, although that doesn't sound very big, I mean, I've always struggled between the being and the doing part. You know, I have something on my wall that Eckhart said quite a while ago in one of his books. Many things in your life matter, but only one thing matters absolutely. And that is knowing who you are. And it's like, yeah, I know that's true, but writing books really matters too. So I feel like I started falling back into just being and letting that be enough. Yes.
Now, Geneen, as I said in the beginning, this series is called Resilience in Challenging Times. And with everything you've been through as a person, I believe you know a lot about what it takes to be resilient. And what I'm curious about is if you were to summarize for that person right now who is kind of coming out of a down cycle, they're listening to a conversation like this because they want further inspiration to really be fully regenerative in their life. If you were to turn it into Geneen Roth's pith instructions for resilience, what would it be?
Well, I would say to make a lot of room for yourself, number one, to be aware the moment you start judging yourself, the very moment you start judging yourself for the body sensation collapse. Notice the thought that you're having. That's one thing, because judgment and shame are very counterproductive to resilience. So that's number one. The second thing I would say is ask yourself how what you're going through right now is for you, not against you. I kept on asking myself that over and over with the cancer when I would find myself slipping down. And I would remember this line from Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, which is already 2,500 years old, where he said, what stands in the way is the way. And I would keep wondering, how is this the way? So I would say to ask yourself, what is the invitation of this? What is it asking of you right now that could be for you, not against you? You know, I'm going to tell you one thing too. I had a dream very early on in the cancer experience, maybe the first week, where I had a dream that there was a big old lion outside my door, huge lion. And I kept on trying to protect myself from this lion. I was living in this flimsy little house with a latch and key thing, one of those things that you just, and I was locking the door to protect myself against the lion. And suddenly I realized the lion was there as a peaceful lion. The lion was not going to hurt me, that I needed to actually ask myself, wow, if I can't keep him out, what might this lion be here to teach me, to show me? So I kept on turning around my resistance to whatever the experience was. And Tami, you know, I'm such a resistor. I'm one of those people who, when asked something, I usually say no first.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a yes person. I say no. I don't want to do that. No. And I see the underside of something, the shadow side of something, what could go wrong in it. I am not an optimist. I just really don't see myself like that. But the cancer, both the cancer and the Madoff experience, very much the cancer showed me how to keep on asking myself, not resist it, not like fight against it, not create a war with it, to actually put down the war and ask how this is for me, not against me.
And then, Geneen, I just want to make sure here before we close, I want to talk to you a little bit about, you guessed it, food. And as the author of Women, Food, and God, and What Sounds True, a teaching series on when food is food and love is love, and feeding the hungry heart. During the pandemic, I think a lot of people have said, look, things are really tough out there. I'm going through a lot. It's all I can do to, stay basically sane and civil with all the things I have that I'm juggling. Comfort food, check. Yes, this is not the time to be a health food nut. This is the time just to have a little reassurance. This is time for me to go pick up some, fried chicken and mashed potatoes. I'll just speak personally. So what's your view, especially as people are going through a time where there's so much deprivation in general? And I know some people are going out, picking up food, but it's not like it was pre-pandemic. What's your view of that?
Well, the first thing is what I said before, toss judgment out the window. So no judgment about that, but actual interest in it. So at the risk of sounding like one of those spiritual people, Tami, who say, yes, death is on your shoulder and all of that, I would say that, and this is what I'm working with the people that I work with all the time about, because many of them have gained what they call the COVID-19 pounds. So what is it that needs comfort right now? Is it fear? Is it anxiety? Is it confusion? Is it unknown? If it's fear, let's look at that. So I'm very into, let's see what's always there. So I think what the pandemic is doing, amongst many other things, but in this regard is, it's bringing up patterns, thoughts, beliefs, feelings that have been there forever. It's not just putting them there. Yes, this situation is triggering it, but it's bringing them up. And this is a great time to look at them. I'm starting to sound like Pollyanna, and I really don't mean to sound like a Pollyanna, and it is a great time to look at what has haunted you your entire life. If you're somebody who's turned to food, what it is you've turned to food to comfort, numb, get rid of, improve, all of that. We have a tendency with our experience, I do, to believe that we're a self-improvement project. We need to push it away, get rid of it, change it. And with the pandemic, it's bringing up all or many of the feelings that have always been there. So if we need comfort because we're telling ourselves scary stories, let's look at those scary stories. Let's name them. Let's look at them. Let's tell the truth about them, because those are in the future. And so let's look and see, what does fear like now? What does it feel like in your body? Where is it? So be very direct, inquire into it, but use it as a chance to really, because it's already is flushing up those feelings, let's look at them and see what they are. So when we go out again, if we ever go out again, that cluster, that constellation, those patterns of feelings that haunt us and have been haunting us forever, have had a chance to be named and felt into and opened up and be compassionate with. You know, I often say all any feeling wants is to be welcomed, to be allowed, to belong, to you know, for you to say, come here, sweetheart, what's going on right now? You're scared, you're ashamed, you're anxious. Okay, tell me all about it. To really be there for yourself, but to be interested in it. Eating from it pushes it down. And so what happens is, and there's nothing wrong with pushing it down if that's what you feel like you need to do. I don't ever make that wrong. But I would also say that what happens when you push it down is you're still left with whatever it is you felt like you needed comfort for when you push down the food. And now you're left with your feelings about having eaten fried chicken and ice cream, whatever that is. And so maybe you're feeling sick or whatever it is. Or, you know, if you're somebody who is a compulsive eater, meaning you eat when you're not hungry and you don't stop when you've had enough food, then you start going into the pattern of that, the failure, the shame, all of that. So now you have doubled what you need comfort for and from instead of made it go away.
So, Geneen, when you were really relishing various experiences, like going to Orcas Island or New York and thinking this might be the last time, did you have that experience with any food items where you're like, I'm really going to have a moment of relishing this? And if so, what were they? What food items?
Well, I've been loving food since the pandemic. Well, of course, I love food a lot. So I really, really, really like food a lot and love the taste of it. I just get a lot of joy and gusto out of eating. And so are you asking me what my favorite foods are right now? What are you asking
like over
me?
the last few months, like there was a moment when it was like, you know, it was biting into that strawberry or something like that, where you just had a moment, you know, there with this awareness of death present in you. I'm curious if something came out even more in a strong highlight in terms of you and food as someone who loves food.
Well, first of all, Tami, I don't eat what I don't love. So I feel, you know, I had a friend of mine who said she has an 11-year-old neighbor who every time she eats, this kid goes, yum, yum. And so I feel like that when I eat. I feel like, yum. So I have a morning drink that I adore, a matcha chai latte that I drink. I never get tired of it. I can't wait to have it every day. And then I just really, really taste it. I'm a little sad when it's gone and when it's over. And it's like, oh, okay. I have been loving strawberries, Matt and I got some coconut bliss. Neither of us eat dairies. Well, he does, but I don't. And got some coconut bliss ice cream or whatever they call it. I don't think they call it ice cream. We got so into it one afternoon. We took these 2 cartons of coconut bliss and we sat at the table and we were just in heaven with the coconut bliss. But I also feel like that about peaches now. We just started going back to the farmer's market after 3 months, and the peaches are starting to come in, and the strawberries, they're coming in, sweet potatoes. I mean, there's hardly anything that I eat that I don't just love.
All right. Well, Geneen, I'd love to share a matcha tea latte with you. I'd love that. I look forward to that. And I just want to take a moment. I'm so happy that you're cancer-free right now and that you were willing to come and be part of our Resilience in Challenging Times series. And thank you for spreading the love. I can feel the love. Thank you.
Oh, Tami, my heart's really, really full of love for you and for what you're doing with these resilience programs and for really reaching so many people. Thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thanks everyone for listening. Sounds true. Waking up the world.